what you guys have done. Your book was wonderful. And where are you going from here? You got the podcast?
Well, we're doing the podcast now because we sort of want to have a little back filler, kind of a little bit like we mentioned stuff, but it's nice because we're talking a little bit deeper with some of the folks that we talked to and mentioned in the book. And so it's kind of fun because it's like, once you read the book, then you kind of get to meet the people a little bit more,
Yeah.
Well, and we both feel it's important to capture a lot of the older voices and a lot of folks, some of these stories that, would otherwise be lost or just memories for families and whatnot. It's just that time in Aspen, those decades were, I want to say magical because there was so much that converged in that little town during that time and still. But it is important to kind of capture some of that. And that's part of where the podcast idea came from with Andy, just to sort of capture some of these voices. And I think both Andy and I have done films on, little short films on doing exactly that. The one I did was I recorded a story my mom used to tell all the time. And Andy and his folks were talking one time, and they did a whole film about that and just reminiscing.
Yeah,
I think it's a really, really good thing to do, is just kind of keep a hold of that little snapshot of the past.
But I got an interesting question because right now we're gearing up to go to Comic-Con in San Diego. So my client we have a booth, and we've had actors come and sign and all that stuff. And what's interesting is I got a real shot in doing that by meeting some of these folks and seeing the fans. I'm in there with the actors. I'm part of the booth and part of them. And it sort of felt like there was the fans and then there was us. And there was sort of this interpretation of what they thought, And I'm wondering, like Hunter has got this huge persona, and I'm wondering if there's any kind of a fun story or something that you might have about Hunter that sort of brings him into the reality of Hunter.
I met Hunter at the Jerome Bar in 73, I believe. 73 or 74. Yeah, I was divorced, so it was at least 74. So I went into the Jerome and I saw Bob Broaddus, and he was a rookie at the time. And he and Hunter were sitting at the end of the bar, and I thought, that really looks fun, right? Oh, those guys really look like fun. So Bob and I were both single parents, and pretty wild and crazy. And so I bellied up to the bar, and Hunter said, you should come out to that house. So I went out to the house with him and Bob, and that sort of began my whole on again off so Broaddus, but it cemented my friendship with Hunter. So I met him. So Bob and I'd had an affair on and off from then 74 up until, in between wives, we would have affairs. He was married 3 times. So then he lived with me for about 8 years. And we spent a lot of time at Hunter. We were actually, when Hunter shot himself, Bob got the call and we went down there, and Bob sort of orchestrated the whole thing with the investigation and the body, and it was something I'll never forget. I was put in charge of answering the landline, and I just watched this whole thing with Hunter sitting in the chair, dead. He shot himself right between the eyes, and he was still sitting there, and Ricky Ballantyne had cleaned up the hood on the stove with all his brains on it, and the word got out, the phone was ringing, and fortunately it was actually Grateful Since my birthday, and we were going to go get Hunter that night anyway to pick him up and take him to Rafelson's. And so I called Rafe and told him what happened. He went don't take his body. I need to come up there. So Rafe came up. They had to find Anita, and Juan and Jennifer were there with Will.
Yeah.
And I think he chose to cap himself, as Bob used to say, with his family there. I think he just wanted them there. I don't think they wanted them to get the phone call. That's just my take. He was to the point he couldn't work anymore. He had terrible physical problems. Anita was leaving him, and he'd had enough. And
well, his cancer was picking up, right? He had
not really. It was
okay.
He was just at the end of his rope. It was mostly his hip and his back, and he was having a hard time getting around, and he couldn't edit anymore. He really couldn't finish anything because he'd gotten so he had lost his capability to really work. Anyway, so fortunately the blizzard set up because the helicopters were all over the house, and that shut the helicopters down. It was on CNN within probably an hour and a half, and it was a remarkable night. It was an unforgettable night, and you know, Hunter's legacy, with everything he left behind, is there's some incredible literature in his basement. I don't know. You have a question about that?
Well, what was interesting to me, and always has been interesting to me about Hunter, and you know, it's funny because Juan has some of it too, is it's a very interesting observation on the world and sort of making analogies of things. And I felt like Hunter had a very interesting way to twist a reality with a message, in a sense that I don't know if he was aware of it, but
absolutely, I'm sure he was.
You know, it felt to me like it was sort of his craft, and that he sort of found a fun way to maneuver things around, which became his writing style. You know,
he was a brilliant writer when he started. I mean, he had a technique of his own, and that Gonzo style, and you know, he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And you know who else was hanging around a lot with us was Doug Brinkley and Ralph Steadman. So we spent a lot of time with Ralph. Mm-hmm. And I watched Ralph and Hunter's whole relationship, because Ralph was illustrating Fear and Loathing, and they did that whole polo series. So I really feel fortunate, the people that I met through Hunter and Broadus. Mm-hmm. When I was at the Jerome, I had this boyfriend that was a ski instructor, cowboy, and I ran into Hunter at the Jerome, and he went, "Oh, come on down to the cabin." And so Chris said, "Oh yeah, I'm a roper, and you know, I have a bullwhip." He said, "You know, I'm a bullwhip champion." And Hunter goes, "Come on down," and I like to shoot guns, so we went out and we shot some guns. We were shooting cans off of the propane tank in the backyard, and then he said to Chris, I want you to show me some of your is that bullwhip? Yeah. He said some of your bullwhip moves. So he went, "Okay, DeDe," went, "You get over there in front of the fireplace, and I'm going to put this cigar in your mouth, and then Chris is going to take it out of your mouth with this bullwhip." Well, I went, "Okay, great." So there, it's like, and he did. I mean, Hunter could convince you to do the craziest, stupid freaking things in the world because of his, you know, his charisma. And I mean, you couldn't say no to Hunter. That's the whole thing. No saying no to him. And also Ed Bradley was around a lot, which was really fun. He was a really good friend. So there was this whole group of people, and they just fed off of each other.
So there was sort of an energy that happened between his clan, his group, his folks that he hung out with.
Yeah,
you'd say.
Not to make light of the previous story when he had passed, but I had a funny thing happen when I was working at the Aspen Times, and we were scanning the wire, you know, and a story had come across that Hunter Thompson had died, and it was a false one. And this happens from time to time on the wire, but we didn't know any better and ran right up to the editor and publisher and said, hey Andy, the story came across the wire that Hunter died. And Andy said, huh, that's weird. I just called Hunter. He said it wasn't true. So I was getting a kick out of that, Hunter says it's not true.
The people that he held court in his kitchen, right? And the people that came through that kitchen, I mean, when his memorial, his funeral, when they shot the cannon off, about the whole, when I die. So Wayne Ewan had made a film 12 years before he died, he killed him. So he explained what he wanted to have happen when he died. So he had this ashes in the cannonball, and they were going to build this tower, which they did out in the back of the property, and they were going to shoot his ashes through the cannonball, and this tower became this magnificent structure that was built by a guy, Steve Cohen, who was Johnny Depp's pretty much production manager, production designer. And Johnny paid $4 million. They made the whole thing happen, and but the people that came to his funeral, there were journalists, and of course, Johnny Depp and Sean Penn and Brinkley and that whole crew, and Ralph Steadman, and I mean the people that Missy came, and she's still talking about it, but we have a film about it, like how they sent his ashes back to this place in the East Coast, and they put Hunter's ashes in a cannonball, and they got an armored truck to bring the ashes back across the country, because they were afraid somebody would hold up the truck to steal Hunter's ashes in this cannonball. I mean, they went full bore. Wow. And I actually have a tape of them building this tower. That when Ewing was the documentarian that really, he cataloged Warner's life. He would go out for every event, and he'd interview Hunter, and I have some remarkable films. If you guys ever want to look at them, you're welcome to look at them.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Well, another thing that was interesting to sort of touch on that a little bit was I saw a documentary, Like a Rolling Stone, on Netflix, which is about Ben Fong, the guy who hired the young kid to do a write-up on a band, and that young kid was Cameron Crowe, who did Almost Famous, and is interesting because when they show all his documentary footage, almost in every shot is the Hunter for Sheriff poster that Tom Benton did. So I'm sure it was signed and sent to Rolling Stone, and it was prominently placed right in their headquarters, which is pretty awesome.
That's awesome. I've seen that poster in the background on a journalist too. She's on TV a lot. Anyway, it's a funny thing. It's a really cool poster.
Yeah. Kind of brings me back to when that stuff was created. I remember, Francois Pelletier has one of the original silk screens that they used to print that.
Really?
Yeah, he was helping Tom Benton pull screens, and they threw one of the old screens away, and he took it and has it stored in his garage somewhere.